Welcome. My name is Patricia Hazell, and I would like for you to repeat after me. My name is Patreesha. And that's because my mother named me Patricia after the song by Pres Prado. And you have heard a little in the introduction. There's no variation for my name. I'm going to be your hostess for some very interesting adventures. And one day, you may be my guest with your stories, because everyone has a story, or everyone has a concern. Today, I have a very, very interesting guest, and she is Mary OBrien, librarian, Fulbright grant winner, and world traveler. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon.
Good
Mrs.
day.
OBrien.
Good day.
Good day. Okay. Welcome to Patricia's Potpourri. And Miss OBrien, could you please tell me some of the things, where have you worked?
Well, I've worked in a junior high for a long, long time, and it was a wonderful adventure. I enjoyed it.
And what job did you do, Miss OBrien, at the junior high?
I was the librarian of the school, and then at one time I also had to run the library and teach reading, and I also taught. I had to teach math. I had to teach math after school, and I did a lot of subjects with students. Students would come to me when they didn't understand, and of course I tried to help them.
I understand at one time you taught Spanish, Miss OBrien?
Oh yes, I did teach Spanish, but I'm not a real Spanish teacher.
Miss OBrien, I've heard stories about your Fulbright grant.
Yes.
And knowing that you are a world traveler, could you just tell me about some of the places in which you have been?
Oh, I've been to most of Europe. I've been to a good part of Latin America, and I was to some countries in the Middle East, like Israel and Turkey. I've been to the Scandinavian countries. Of course, I've been to Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. I've been to Germany. I've been to France.
Ireland. Your last name is O'Brien.
Yes, I'm first generation.
Could you tell me a little about that, Mary O'Brien?
Well, O'Brien means grandson of Brian. That's what the name means.
And your family, your heritage?
Is Irish.
And where?
Well, it's Kerry, and it's also the west of Ireland, Leitrim.
Oh, I know that at one time I knew that there was a civil war in Ireland. Could you tell me a little bit about that civil war? And
well, I don't know what you'd call a civil war, but most of the Irish population did not like England occupying the country. And they did have English soldiers patrolling the country. And in the 1920s, I think they started a real war. And eventually, 26 counties were free and 6 were not. 6 were part of the British Empire.
Wow. Now, you just asked me what is a civil war, and I define a civil war as an internal fight, like a family fight.
Yeah.
Could you give me a little more information about that internal fight, that family fight that took place in Ireland?
Well, again, I don't really know. But you see, the Irish objected to the way the English treated them. And there was one time my father told me this, and I couldn't believe it. During World War I, Tommies were needed. That's the British soldiers. And the Irish, or I should say the English administration, went to the prisons, took prisoners out, put black and tan uniforms on them, and they patrolled Ireland. And in one occasion, they took men, tied them to bombs, and exploded the bombs. And when my father told me that, I didn't believe it until I went to Ireland and I saw the monument in Kilorglin.
Wow.
And I was really shocked because I couldn't believe any country being so uncivilized. I mean, that's not what I expect from the British.
I understand that. Now, Miss O'Brien, you and I both worked in a school where students told us from a varied background, told us things about the British, about how their country was occupied or dominated by the British.
Yes.
So I know that there were several young little girls. You asked a question.
Oh.
And
Yes.
what was that question?
Well, years ago in Argentina, things were very bad. And again, back in the 1840s, Argentina seemed to have had a number of terrible things happen. There was always a crisis going on. And while the crisis was going on, the British went into the Malvinas Islands. This was around the 1840s, and this was in spite of the Monroe Doctrine.
Wow.
They took the Malvinas, changed the name to the Falklands. And again, in the late 1970s, there was another crisis going on, and the president of Argentina said, let's go and get the Malvinas. And Argentina declared war on the British, because it was a very sore point to them all these years that land had been taken away from them. And remember, this was in spite of the Monroe Doctrine, which said that the Western Hemisphere was for the countries that were already there. And in other words, they did not want any kind of colonialism going on.
Wow.
And it was a very sad thing. The British did lose. The British won, and our country came out on the side of the British and offered to negotiate. And my point about it is, how can you offer to negotiate when you've come out on the side of one country? You've lost your neutrality. You cannot negotiate unless you're neutral.
Wow. Besides Argentina, and you experiencing that, tell me some of the other countries in which you have been.
I was to Turkey. It was a magnificent country. I was to Russia.
Tell me the story. I know you know a story about a woman named Olga and a cross in Russia. Tell me about that.
Well, when I went to Russia, it was during the time of the Cold War, and Olga had been born in Russia, and she left the country. And she came back. But there was a woman who traveled. You see, we were given this opportunity of going to Russia, and to have a chance to go there, you'd be foolish not to take advantage of it. And there was this Polish woman. She was Polish extraction, but she was an American citizen. She was born in the United States. And she was wearing a gold cross, and she was told that she would have to surrender her cross because it was propaganda.
Uh-huh.
And when we were going into Russia, we had to give up all of our books, pictures, because we were bringing in propaganda. It was quite an experience.
Well, I see, Mary O'Brien, you have been well-traveled, and you have taken those experiences to the schools with you. And I have seen, personally, your interaction with students. And I'd like to ask you something about the educational system in which we have now. And I think I'm going to ask you about the old chancellor and then the new chancellor. Tell me, do you have any opinion or feelings about the old chancellor? No, there were two old chancellors. There was Dennis Walcott and there was Joe Klein.
Well, I would say...
Oh, excuse me, under Bloomberg.
Yes. I would say it's very difficult to be a chancellor when you've never really taught for any period of time. And the good thing now is that the chancellor we have was a superintendent, she was a principal, and she was a teacher. And she therefore would understand the problems, and she could make constructive suggestions on how to improve the school and how you could help students better.
I think that you may have some ideas, Mary O'Brien, since you've been a world traveler and
Yes.
since you've been in the system a while.
Yes.
Do you have any ideas of how we can improve this educational system here in New York and maybe beyond?
Yes. Well, I would like to see in the kindergarten and the pre-kindergarten, I would like to see the students introduced to languages like Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, because when you have a very young child, his brain is like a blotter. He can pick up a foreign language very quickly. Another thing that I would like...
Excuse me, let me interrupt you for 1 second. That is also the Maria Montessori method. She figured that in early childhood, when she exposed children to languages, and in a Montessori school, a child is exposed to many languages when they are young, and therefore they become proficient and exposed to those languages.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that I would like to see, we have some wonderful teachers in the New York City school system. They're absolutely wonderful. And I would like to see films made of these teachers teaching a class. And then afterwards, I would like the teacher to be interviewed and have suggestions from the teacher on how the teacher gets to the student, what the teacher must do to make the material interesting for the student. And of course, give the student the opportunity to learn, and again, give the student the help that he needs. And another thing that I would like to see, again, we have teachers coming into the school system, and it's always a big problem. How can I take this teacher and within let's say a year or two, turn this teacher into an experienced teacher? And because I was a librarian in the school, and I was given teachers that were just out of school, they knew very little about teaching, and they would have to teach a class.
Excuse me, Ms. O'Brien, you say a year or two. Well, under the Bloomberg administration, in a year or two, if a person who was a teacher in a year or two could become a principal after a year or two.
Well, I would say a person in that category would be a person of authority without knowledge. Yes, because it takes a lot of time. But anyway, my suggestion is that when you have an inexperienced teacher, the best thing you can do for that teacher is to have the teacher teach the lesson to you. Then you go over, you explain to the teacher what to do, what to emphasize. And after that a few times, you'd be surprised how the teacher improves. I would also like to see our assistant principals who are teachers of teachers. I would like to see them work with the fledgling teacher. And I would also like to see our assistant principals, who are again teachers of teachers, teach courses to teachers the way they used to when we had other superintendents and chancellors.
Miss O'Brien, there's a new thing called a Danielson method. Charlotte Danielson. Have you heard of her?
No, I haven't.
Oh, because I'm wondering if Charlotte Danielson, well, I know a little about her teaching background, but I would like to know if we did not have those methods, except for the last year or two, why do we have doctors and lawyers and all of these scholars and professionals now, when before Danielson, they should not have existed according to the authorities that be now?
Well, I have been to Lehman College, and I've met some of our former students. I've been to Einstein Medical School. I had to go there to get something. I couldn't get into the library because I was not on the staff, and I met some of our former students, and who went to my middle school, and they brought me in. And these were under the old-fashioned methods.
So you're saying that people were successful before this Danielson method. Now, I know I grew up under the progressive system, something called a progressive system, and I cannot tell you how many systems and buzzwords and different types of programs that they have had during my lifetime. Miss O'Brien, do you remember, could you give me a category about the different types of programs, educational systems, that the changes that it has gone through during your lifetime?
Well, it seems to me there was always a change. There was always a change. We changed from year to year.
I think I have noticed books with the same exact information, and I'm not talking about library books. I'm talking about textbooks with the exact same information being discarded, so that they can buy a whole new set of books. And I have a feeling that there's something going on. Okay, I have seen the exact same material be discarded. And here comes a new shipment. And I'm wondering about the course of those discarded. And then I'm wondering how people in undeveloped countries who have the same books, why they are ahead of American students, yet they don't have the latest brand of books. And one woman told me something. She went to Brazil and she saw what the students had. Hardly anything. And she came back and she told me, she worked in the school with me, and she said, oh, we do so much. And we have so much, and they have so little, and they do so much.
Well, it's the motivation. In most of these countries, education is not free. In our country, it is free. We have students coming from a lot of foreign countries, where education is not free. They come to our country, they can get an education, they're motivated. Many of our kids feel that they are in almost a prison. And I think this is a terrible thing, that they do not appreciate education. And I think one of the things that they should do is for these students that do not have academic talent, I feel that they should reinstitute the shop classes. We went through terrible times in the Board of Education, and of course one of the things they do is they start cutting. They cut library, they cut music, they cut shop classes, they cut home economics. And of course, once the cuts go through, they're never brought back. And it's a shame.
I agree with you, and I believe that you have to stimulate the interests of students. We have to have the types of classes in which the students could enjoy and appreciate. Everyone is not academic. When I went to Nevada, I remember the chancellor there said that there should be more technical education.
Yes.
Everybody's not academic.
Exactly.
I just want to say one thing fast before we go. I know in Argentina, there was, going back to your trip to Argentina, about the libraries. Could you please explain to my audience about the libraries in Argentina?
Well, we used the Benjamin Franklin Library, which was an American library. But we also had an opportunity to visit high school students that were attending. They were attending high school in a university, and they had very good libraries. They had the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, which is what can be used to bring up to date our textbooks. We don't have to throw out a set of textbooks because they haven't last year's events. We can bring our students up to date with using the Reader's Guide and periodicals, and of course the computer.
And I was trying to get at the point that every library is not free. In this world, there are libraries that are not free. And I remember my bringing you a brochure from a nice woman who gave me a flyer about they wanted to charge for the libraries in the United States. But this was under Bloomberg, and Bloomberg could be a whole new story, a whole program, a whole series of programs about what was done. But I think I have to wrap up that. I could talk to you forever, Mary O'Brien. And you know, I would love to wrap up. And you know, Mary O'Brien has a story, I have a story, and you have a story. Because we all have a story. We all have concerns and interests. And what I'd like to do is one day I'd like to hear your story. I want to thank you so much for being with me.
Well, it was my pleasure, believe me.
Okay. And once again, I'm Patricia, one of the Harlem Black girls. And when you hear my theme music, you'll realize who I am, a native New Yorker. Live close to 110th Street. That's across 110th Street. That's the beginning of my theme, Will Hutchinson across 110th Street. Very much appreciate having you as an audience. If you have a story, if I see you on the street, please shake my hand. I'd love to have you as one of my guests. Okay, because everyone has a story, because we are interesting people right here in New York City. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I want to tell you, have a good and safe time and get your story together for me. Have a very good evening, afternoon, or morning.
Or night.
Or night. Thank you.